again, and welcome to the next exciting installment of the Who Cares About Anime podcast. In this corner, it's me, your host, Jonny Lobo. In the opposite corner is a familiar voice and my good friend, Michael from Did You Know Anime?
They don't make gravestones for stray dogs.
I bet if you've been keeping up with anime as of this recording, it being summer of 2018, really a great year for anime, actually, if I may say. You got new Gunsmith Cats, got I Tenchi Muyo series dubbed, and another great thing about this that Mike and I here both experienced at the same time, and we said this is really special. It's going to be really fun to talk about, so let's do it. So, of course, we're talking about Megalo Box. 13 episodes wrapped up here in 2018, and it was a very creative, fresh retelling of Tomorrow's Joe, Ashita no Joe, which was a very popular manga turned anime. Mike, help me out here. About how old is the original manga?
Well, as it says, the icon probably should be bigger than the anime, but it says it's the 50th anniversary, so the manga came out in 1968.
1968, folks. Wow. So, for old fans of Tomorrow's Joe and new fans alike, welcome. And if you're too new to Megalo Box and have not seen it while you're hearing this right now, as I always strive to do, I'm going to give you a friendly spoiler alert warning. Stop now. Because we're going to be talking about it and we're going to be spoiling stuff along the way. And I don't want to spoil stuff for you. I don't. I want you to experience it yourself, as with every title we've done thus far on the Who Cares About Anime podcast. But this one, I'm still feeling the hype about it. I'm sure the same can be said of my guest today. And so go see it. And then come back and listen to it and cue it up right here. So here we go. Let's just, I figured in this instance, it just being the two of us, Mike, and incidentally, I happened to be over at your pad, and we were doing work on something. We're always doing work on something. I can't even remember what, but walk me again and the rest of our listeners through that. Because I think it was you who put us onto that. You said, "Hey, have you heard about Megalo Box?" And I said, "Yeah, I've seen that been going around." Surface level, I thought I liked the aesthetic. Be something I've been considering checking out, but I just haven't. And I'm pretty sure you pretty much said like, "Well, let's take a break. I've been thinking about watching it myself, and let's check it out and see what this is all about." So why don't you take it from there?
So I had heard about Megalo Box as soon as because I heard a little bit of rumblings, and all you have to do is look at that main poster that everybody posts, and you immediately go Cowboy Bebop, old school. It's boxing. It looks badass. He's got the gear, so it's got that sci-fi effect. Everybody on ANN and Crunchyroll, Mike Toole, all of them were just gushing about it. They were like people I didn't even think would talk about Megalobox in a positive way. Like the Anime Man, for instance, loved it right out the gate. So I'm thinking, okay, this thing is crossing generational boundaries with anime fans. And it looks different. It looks like it's a different change of pace. And then I found out, it was based on the original Ashita no Joe, Tomorrow's Joe. And so I thought, you know what? I'll put it on the back burner, but this one is one I want to try. And so, we were working on something, and I thought, you know what, this would be a great opportunity. Let's watch Megalobox. Let's see how good it is. And so we sit down and I cue it up, and as soon as we start watching it, it's hype. Like the music immediately hits you. Done by Mabanua, who is a hip hop artist, who also worked on Kids on the Slope, which is a Shinichiro Watanabe production. So if Shinichiro Watanabe is working with this guy, it's got to be good, and it immediately hits you. The thing that it immediately hits you as soon as we started watching it, and it takes all of a minute or so to just hook you. If you're a fish in the water, this anime just comes by, especially if you're a classic anime fan, it grabs you immediately.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair to say. I certainly was drawn to it, and I think the music was a big part of that. And I think we're going to be reiterating this throughout the cast. I suspect is the music is a wonderful example of that. I feel the entirety of this production is a mixture of fresh and throwback. I mean, for example, I think all the soundtrack was great for it, but at several key moments, and everybody will know it if you've seen this, what I'm talking about. And I asked you, I remember going, Mike, what's the name of that track? You know the one I'm talking about. And the internet tells us it's Get Up,
Yep.
how appropriately named. And you listen to that. When I heard that the first time in the series, and only ran through it once as of this recording, so I don't remember the first time you hear it. It's very much its own, but I would eat my hat if if it was if the person composing that, or if it was no, that Eye of the Tiger, what is that? I've never heard of that. No, that had that had no bearing on the note. Like, shut up. Yes, it yes, it did. It was so it was its own thing, but it was you hear that doom 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 doom, and you are thinking Eye of the Tiger if you're watching that. There's no way you're not, and there is no way that that was accident in my mind. That is
Oh
my
yeah.
humble opinion. So
Well, no, it's funny because you're listening, and like if you listen to all the other music in Megalo Box, Get Up stands out because it sounds like it's coming from the 80s. So you know immediately that it wasn't just like they didn't just stumble into making a song that sounded like Eye of the Tiger. Like they deliberately evoked that by making that intro the way it was. Because I mean, Eye of the Tiger, Rocky, come on.
yeah, come on. So that was another thing too about the narrative structure and the plot, and me admittedly not being familiar with the original with Tomorrow's Joe. Um, but watching this, I remember a lot of the fun was of it was I like something, you like something that you don't see something coming and it swerves you. So, having said that though, there were some fun moments in this where we weren't right every time, which was great. But there were a couple of times where you kind of call it, you kind of see what's going to happen. I'm thinking, uh, you know, every little interaction, every time you see kind of an inner moment of conflict with Yuri thinking about Joe or vice versa, I'm thinking gearless Joe, he's going to go all the way. Who ever heard of boxing without without gears, without technical equipment? Who ever heard of such a thing, right?
It's unheard of.
I don't know. Maybe that would catch on. I don't know in a parallel universe. But as he's going up the ranks, I'm going, Yuri. He's gonna ditch the gear. He's gonna ditch the gear. Joe gets all the way going gearless, and Yuri's seeing this guy, and he's like, forget all the pomp and circumstance, forget the money, the development of this technology that the company is clearly invested in experimenting and selling to military contractors or the highest bidder. I don't even know. Forget all of that. You just have two fighters with that fighting instinct and that desire to push themselves and to fight a quote unquote worthy opponent. And you see Yuri saying that this guy, he's the real deal. And it's just like, once you know that about Joe, you know that about Yuri, you're like, there's no way in the final match that Yuri's going to be fighting Joe with, the best gear available. And Joe's fighting bareback with nothing. And if Yuri won that, it would haunt Yuri for the rest of his days. He'd be like, same thing he was saying to Mikio when they're testing each other out and testing each other's nerves, and has that moment, was that you that decided to block, or was that just your gear? And so there was a lot of stuff like that. There's a lot of, like you said, very reminiscent of shonen in general, but also boxing movies, particularly American boxing movies. Everybody thinks Rocky right off the bat. And just yeah, just the 80s in general. I really felt a lot of that. I remember excitement. You pointed it out first off, going, Johnny, is that? I go, what? He's like, it's a montage in an anime,
Yeah.
in a contemporary anime. It's a montage. It was a honest to God montage. We don't really see that in American films much anymore. We don't see that much in anime. So they were definitely going for that vibe.
Yeah, I one of my favorite moments. I don't know if it was during the montage. I don't remember exactly, but there's that moment where, or maybe it was during the montage when Joe is going up the ranks, and you have Yuri, and he's beating the machine, and there's a moment where he does pretty decent. He gets like a 71%, and he starts rubbing his head and walking away, and immediately he hears, "Oh, Gearless Joe is ranked up to 34 or something," and he immediately drops his stuff, and he hears that moment. He remembers that moment when he walked into the underground and Joe was like, "Is that what you call megalo boxing?" And he immediately puts his thing back down and starts fighting the thing again. It's like that's so boxing movie. That's so American boxing movie. It's not even funny. But at the same time, it's very shonen-y. But it's shonen without kids. It's shonen without teenagers. It's shonen it's the shonen ideal applied to adults. And I think, that's one of the things that made Megalobox so interesting was moments like that, how it took stuff that we know of in contemporary anime and mixed it in a very throwback style to the old days. We see a montage. Look at the character designs, all right? Women look like women and they have noses. Everyone has noses. Everybody is very well defined as an adult, and there are varying degrees of that. I mean, it's a brand new toy, but it feels like you're playing with one that you've loved your whole life. Like Megalobox was something that, no matter where you started at, you can't help but appreciate it. You can't help but appreciate the heart that goes into it.
Yeah, absolutely. But in the spirit of getting things somewhat on a familiar course for our listeners, might be tough. But what do you think, as far as you personally, Mike? Favorite character or characters and why?
Oh God. Uh, I've always said that the mark of a truly great show, series, movie, OVA, across any medium, across, animated, real life, whatever, is how well the characters are written and how well they're executed. And Megalobox is one of those rare instances where every single character, you can understand them. You can get behind them. Even if you can love them, you can hate them. They elicit an emotion from you. Um, God, like the Team Nowhere, the Joe, Nambu, and Sachio. Every like they all came from different corners of the underground. One, Sachio was with a gang of roving kids because he's an orphan. Joe and Nambu were together. Nambu's a drunken, you know, he throws fights, and then Joe is just kind of going through life trying to get it together. You can't not get behind Joe. You can't. Like his voice actor Yoshimasa Hosoya, who is, I mean, you look at his resume right now, he's done everything, but I think he was a perfect fit for Joe. Joe is the literally, not just because his name is Junk Dog, but he's literally the epitome of the underdog. You, at no point, like with the regular shonen series, like if you see Goku, you're like, oh, who's gonna beat Goku? Like seriously, even now that we've got a new Broly movie, it's like we know that Goku's gonna win. With Joe, you never feel like he's gonna win. Like you want to believe it, but then you look against these people that he's going against, and you're like, there's no way. There's no way he can beat him. He got knocked down in the first round. He almost went to 10. How's he gonna beat him? That's perfect. That's that they perfectly brought that character to life and made you believe that he couldn't win. And I think that's phenomenal. I really liked Yuri. Now, we'll probably get into this later, but and I won't go too deep into it now. But as soon as I looked at Yuri, I thought, I think the director, I think he might be a fan of Kawajiri, Yoshiaki Kawajiri. I didn't want to say that because I didn't want to project my own. Uh, I didn't want to. You don't want to believe like, oh, this guy was inspired. Is that a JoJo reference? Like, you don't want to believe that everything that you like is connected. But I knew as soon as I looked at Yuri, I'm like, he's got to be like the director had to have seen something from Yoshiaki Kawajiri, and he does. But we'll talk about that later. Um, I really liked Yuri a lot because one of the things I liked about Yuri so much was he's the champion, but even though he's the champion, he realizes that he can't just take it for granted. Because how many times have you seen in a shonen show or like the bad villain guy is like, haha, yes, I'm the best. And you see him like kind of sort of doing okay, but he never pushes himself. He's always like, you'll never get up to me. I'm the greatest. And even though Joe is fighting without gear and Yuri is without a doubt the most dominant megaloboxer in Megalobox, undisputed, he still has those human moments. He still has those moments, like I said, with the where he's fighting the robot trying to get better. He hears that thing that Joe said to him. That got to him. He's a human. That's important. He can't be this like flawless uber champion who Goku punches at the end of the fight and spirit bomb punches and he's done. Like, no, Yuri was a champion. He's the big guy. He's the Mike Tyson of this punch out boxing game, but he had a human side. He had faults. He had fears, and those end up getting the best of him sometimes. And I think that also shocks a lot of other people, like Yukiko. She thinks, "Aha, yes, he's perfect and splendid and amazing, and take your shirt off, Yuri, again, please." And then all of a sudden, Yuri will be like, "Yeah, no, Joe's the real deal." And Yukiko will be like, "What? But you have the squillion billion dollar gear on. How could you say that?" He's not a he's not perfect, and that's what makes him so good. The other character I really really liked was uh Aragaki, the veteran. I really liked him because he brought a different dynamic to Megalobox because he was spoiler alert for anybody, but he was previously Nambu's student, and he ends up going off to war, which was actually the way I'm sure it wasn't like this in the original, but kind of sort of implies Middle Eastern war. He's a veteran, got his legs blown off, got shrapnel, PTSD. God, he had such a good story arc in Megalobox. I would almost argue his arc was better than the final one, but it's not because obviously Yuri and Joe's that's the whole buildup of the show. But man, I loved Aragaki just because he brings a different element to it. He showed that Megalobox wasn't just a shonen series. It wasn't just a I'm gonna be the best around. Like it really another thing that humanized Megalobox was like, look, this guy was on track to be Joe before Joe gets his legs blown off. His PTSD was going to kill himself, and it's very intense. But he comes back, he starts fighting back, and he wants to fight Joe, face his demons. I mean, what's not to love? And then before I go, I just also want to say his trainer was named Mr. Miyagi. So you're the best around.
Again, that falls under the realm of like, I'm having a hard time. It's like, do you believe in coincidences? It's like, well, sometimes, but in this case, yeah, we had a trainer, Mr. Miyagi. Um, just to jump off of that, um, yeah, this was one about every character brought something to the table. Um, I forget his name now. I wouldn't say a favorite character, but very interesting, very stoic and disturbing and terrifying was the Yakuza boss. That is
Oh yeah.
kind of the sort of the impetus in a way, and then later is sort of this obstacle and so on and so forth. But I almost wondered if you were going to forget to mention him, but yeah, Aragaki. First of all, the dude, you've got that. Was that butterfly really there or not? Sort of thing. Which when he went through that initial trauma, in any event, he owned that, and he symbolically, this dude's the manliest dude you could ever see. He gets a butterfly tattoo on his chest, and it's a boxing movie, so I'm thinking he floats like a butterfly. Maybe he stings like a bee too. Yeah, and that has to be a good character. When I'm watching this, I don't have the criticism lens on. I'm just enjoying this, and I'm genuinely conflicted. I'm watching him. I learn about his backstory, and I don't remember which episode it was exactly, but all of a sudden I'm like, I'm kind of rooting for him now. Like, this guy should win it. Holy cow! What a backstory. What the obstacles this guy went through. And it's also great there because we see so much of this character. We see his backstory. We see a wonderful. Maybe that'll be cathartic for some people. I hope it is. Whether they, are in the military, where they have PTSD or otherwise. But he gets to that point where he's trying to recapture something that's lost. For a little while, he kind of is. It's like The Godfather. Oh, it's nothing personal. It's just business. Well, it was personal. As in The Godfather, it's like no, it is personal too. He was trying to, you know what? I'm gonna beat the snot out of your protege to hurt you, Nanbu, because you hurt me. And that whole feeling, which was actually really, it was underscored. It was there, but it was subtle because again, this doesn't mean they're bad or anything, but in like a lot of shonen stuff, you would have heard an inner monologue, or he would have shouted angrily eventually, like, "That was supposed to be me," blah, 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 blah. Never comes up. You never even hear him thinking that, but it's there. That's just digging into him. But, before the end, he realizes not doing it for Joe, not doing it for Nanbu, for himself. He lets that go. And initially he thought, once I beat up Nanbu's new protege, I humiliate Nanbu, then I can move on. And it's great that he has the wisdom before the end to realize that's not how that works. You can't, because you're just going to move the goalpost. And even if he had beaten Joe, so he decides there, you know what? Fair, unfair, whatever you want to call it, life happened. It went the way it went. And Nanbu's in a different place now. And I'm in a different place now. And he ends up realizing, you know what? I'm going to move on. And, he had a support group there. You can see, speaking of Mr. Miyagi and the gym he's training at, they're all people who have, like, you can see the artificial limbs. You can see they are disabled or injured in some way, and so he takes that on as a new cause as well, something constructive and therapeutic and healing, not just for himself but for others. So what an interesting character. Before I go on all day there, but also in these episodes, I remember you commenting on this as we were watching or shortly thereafter. It's where you see a lot more of Nanbu too. When we're introduced to him, we kind of think, I didn't know he was going to go along for the whole ride, to be honest. You just kind of think like, is this some, small time, whoever that Joe's got to kind of get past to make it to the quote unquote big time. He's working it in these underground fights and has just kind of, gotten comfy in a niche, and it's just like, come on, Joe, come on, just throw the fight, put up a good fight, but throw the fight. We get paid. I'll go drink. You do whatever you want with your money, and we do it all again, and that's pretty much it. And you think not very highly of him, but then you see his backstory, and it reminds me of a certain quote: "Everybody's fighting a battle you know nothing about." And you see Nanbu's backstory was no, he was the real deal, and you see that when he's training Joe later on, like he knows his stuff. He's a trainer. He's a coach. He's a teacher. and he loved being that. And you can see that what happened with Aragaki, and he thought he was dead. That it is on Nanbu. He never says that's not on him because Aragaki's like, you said you'd wait for me. You didn't check hard enough, kind of thing. And that's all true, but that broke Nanbu's world too when he thought Aragaki, his golden boy, was dead, and he kind of packed it up and closed the shop, and that was that. And so you see then eventually that Megalonia is not just, as we find out later, through the result of machinations of Yakuza boss who wants to rig it for big money. But along the way, I think Nanbu recaptures that dream as well. So you see kind of a full spectrum. You see Joe, he's young, I think early 20s, he's restless, he wants to make a name for himself. You see Sachio, who's a young kid who's been through a hell of a lot for being such a young kid, and he's looking to belong, and is looking for a little bit of the glory as well. And then Nanbu, who's the old grizzled member of the team, and recapturing a little bit of that lost glory. So it's just phenomenal cast of characters all around.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing with Nanbu, and again, one of the things that makes Megalo Box so good is you think that you have the characters all figured out, and it'll kind of, it's like a weaving of thread. All of the thread together is Megalo Box. And sometimes the way the episodes are going, they'll lead you in one direction, and you're like, oh, this guy's the main character. And then you slowly start to see something happen with Nanbu, and you realize that there's these little bits and pieces that you may or may not have paid attention to that you're like, oh shit, like this is a this was a thread that I didn't realize was there, and then you go off on it and it reveals a whole nother aspect to the character because you're like, that's why Nanbu was so good at it, because that's why Nanbu was so good at throwing fights, was because he knew how to train a fighter. He knew when it would look good because he had done it before. And you don't really think about that. That's really how good the storytelling was.
Yeah, yeah, and even even some of the side characters we got. The guy's name was Pepe Iglesias from Mexico, if I'm recalling right. And then was it Glenn Burrows? Is that the guy's
Yep,
name?
Glenn Burrows.
Glenn Burrows was. I think he was American, wasn't he? I'm pretty sure he was. He was American, and it certainly had an American
I'm
voice.
pretty sure he was American. He kind of gave off that look.
He certainly did, and that vibe. And boy, we checked, and as of this recording, I don't think you did either. I couldn't find those guys being credited, which was a shame because the Pepe Iglesias, whoever did him, sounded like a native speaker of Spanish. He was speaking in Spanish, and as was the case, has not yet been dubbed in English officially. I'm sure it will, though. Wink, wink. But we're watching this in Japanese, and in the Japanese, it's not just a Japanese guy doing his best at English. It's somebody who speaks English. Like I said, it sounded like an American accent, um, natively. So,
Well, it's funny you say that because I'm looking at A&N again, and according to them, they actually have for Glenn Burrows, they have a Matt P as Glenn Burrows, which they did not have before when we were originally looking. And then for Pepe Iglesias, they have a Roberto G, but they do not link to anything. And on Anime News Network, it looks like those are their only credits. So, but yeah, no, they were complete unknowns. And again, you got to give it to Megalobox and how much, and you could tell they really cared about it because, like John was saying, they spoke their own language. Like Pepe Iglesias spoke Spanish, Glenn Burrows spoke English in a Japanese dubbed anime. It's phenomenal.
get out. Days ago, mere days ago, we looked on A&M, we looked elsewhere, could not find it. So Thumbs up, A&N. Good job, whoever was on that. I imagine some other people were probably like, "Hey, yeah, who did that? Like, come on, they did a good job." And it's like, you know, give them a little credit, little shout out there. So that's great. Um, so yeah, let's just then go into, as we were alluding to before, but let's go a little bit more into, I guess, kind of the um, cinematographic side of things, if you will, or anything else with the theme, with the storytelling, how it was presented, and that kind of thing. Let's maybe talk a little bit about its director. And what do you think the fact that this thing exists, that we know as Megalo Box, what do you think that's going to do for its director's career? What do you think, as we've seen, it really seems to have made some ripples? What do you think that means possibly for anime in the future from here on out?
Well, it's crazy when, one of the first things that we told each other was like, who's the guy who directed this? Because this guy was you coined the term, or I don't know if you coined the term or you got it from someone else, but make anime cinematic again. And that was something that director Yo Moriyama understood. He understood that even though Megalobox was a 13 episode TV series, he shot it like a piece of cinema. He understood that he wanted to make that every part, the voice acting and the music and the animation and the scenes all had to line up together. It wasn't just throw voice actors, throw random music, throw random ambiance, throw plot together and just kind of like layer it like a cake, kind of, sort of, whatever. He weaved the entire thing together in a way that I'll go out and say it right now. Megalobox is the best anime in the last, fuck, I don't know, since Madoka, maybe, or Redline, probably Madoka, because that was the last time that I remember watching an anime and thinking, this is a piece of cinema. The guy who's shooting this, the director, understands that this isn't just a piece of entertainment. It's a piece of cinema. I'm looking at I'm looking at the credits right now just to show how much Mr. Moriyama was part of this. He was the director. He was the storyboard for episode one. He was the episode director for episode one. So episode one literally was his baby. He was the conceptual design for the series. I mean, like, the Megalobox was his baby. He made sure that that first episode, pun very much intended, packed the right kind of punch. I referenced this a little bit earlier. We're talking about cinema. Crunchyroll did an interview with Yo Moriyama talking about like his influences and all that, and he talked about being influenced by Yoshiaki Kawajiri, in particular, Cyber City Oedo 808, which, going back to what I said earlier, I was like, I knew it because I looked at Yuri and I'm like, that's totally a Kawajiri design. If you have ever, Ninja Scroll, if you have ever watched a Yoshiaki Kawajiri anime, you know, because there's always a character who looks like they've got the big, poofy, like over the top glam 80s hair, and they've got a particular kind of face. That's when you know you're watching a Kawajiri anime. And I'll fight anybody. Yoshiaki Kawajiri is one of the top 10 anime directors of all time, period. He is such a phenomenal director. He's in the same vein as Hiroki Hayashi, Ano. He's up there because of the way that he directs. He's a no bullshit director. He directs everything, no matter what it is, in a way that pacing is king. And any director who ever puts pacing as their number one priority always has a better thing, always has a better product because no matter what the positives and negatives are, they put it together in a way that's engaging no matter what. And you could tell that Yo Moriyama went from that school of thought because you get to the end of an episode of Megalobox and you look at your phone or your watch or whatever and you're like, has it been 30 minutes already? Like, no way. Like, that's how engaged you are in it, which is the mark of a truly good director who understands pacing. Um, And this is his directorial debut, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first thing he has ever done. You want to talk about jumping out of the gate? He's Joe. He's literally Junk Dog, Gearless Joe, because nobody knew who he was, and all of a sudden he makes this gigantic leap out of the starting gate, and everybody's like, "Whoa, who's this guy?" And all of a sudden it's like, no, he's up there now. He. It feels so good to have an anime director that you're just like, oh my god, I recognize an anime director now. He's not just a director with no style, no theme. He doesn't have any kind of presence. His directing doesn't have any kind of uniqueness to it. Right off the bat, like I said in that interview, he is taking from the old school. He's a throwback, even though he's a brand new director. Crunchyroll asked him, "Do you think more anime are going to be made like this?" He said, "No, but I firmly believe that will make everything that he does great because he will be bringing to the table something that anime fans will not see very often. When Yo Moriyama makes a series, people will watch it. It's like when Gen Urobuchi makes a series. It doesn't matter what it is. People go to Gen Urobuchi because he's a phenomenal writer. And I'll fight anybody who says him. He might be called the Uro Butcher for a reason, but he's a phenomenal writer. Yo Moriyama is now there. He's a rising star. He's a hot commodity. I would think he's a hot commodity. But most importantly, he understands that you need something different. He said it himself in the interview. Anime, I got good. That's the reason that I understand what I'm doing and I like what I'm doing and I make the anime that I do is because I don't just watch anime. And the anime that I do watch isn't the same 12 series coming out every season. And I think that's really important for anime. Is every single series he make going to be like that? No, because not every Watanabe series was Cowboy Bebop. But that being said, if we get something akin, if we get Moriyama's version of Space Dandy next, I'm perfectly okay with that. That's something else I look forward to, and I think that's a positive for anime across the board.
Well said. And I cannot do better. So I should just shut up. I've said that multiple times in this podcast. I probably should take my own advice, but it was really satisfying. Me, being a film critic, and you being a filmmaker. It was really fun seeing that. We saw that interview afterwards. I don't remember when it came out. It might have even come out after the last episode aired, but I can't recall at the moment. But we saw it after that, and you have that sense of validation. If you're film literate, you're watching this Moriyama, and before we even knew who he was, like this person knows what they're doing. And you look him up real quick, and it's like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? He's no newbie to the industry. He's worked his way up. But this was his directorial debut? You are kidding me. And we both had that Yuri reaction to seeing Joe. Yeah, he might be fighting underground. Oh, he looks a little scruffy. He's this young upstart. He doesn't even have good gear. But if you know your stuff, you look past that and you can see plain as day. This guy's the real deal. And that's what I feel about Moriyama right now. And as I've said before, we'll watch your career with great interest. Like, oh my gosh, like I've seen some people say like, well, the ending felt a little rushed. Okay, like first of all, had 13 episodes. It's very clear that they had 13 episodes, that he had 13 episodes to work with, because I think we even called that like, hey, what are the chances Yuri and Joe is going to be 13 rounds? It ended up being 13 rounds. These are not arbitrary numbers like, I think that's all I need. He had to do 13 episodes, If he had had more time, if he had had free reign, who knows? But again, this is his directorial debut, so I'm not surprised that it's frightening actually how good he is, because he's not quite to a Hiroki Hayashi, but he's close. He's already close. And It'd be so interesting. I would love to, see future. I'm sure there will be plenty of future interviews with him. I'd love to pick his brain. I'd love to know. We've brought him up a couple times already, but it's hard watching this to not speculate a little. Like, I wonder if this would have existed, or at least looked the way it did, or been presented the way it did, had, hip hop soundtrack without Shinichiro Watanabe, without stuff like Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Champloo paving the way a little bit. It's not to take away from it and its own originality. And like you said, again, speaking of validation, you had that with like Cyber City or something. And, I felt that. You probably did too. I felt that a little bit when Joe meets up with Yuri. He's on his motorcycle and almost hits Yukiko, and they're outside, and you see this big stadium looking thing under construction. And I could not help but think, Akira. You think that in your mind if you are, again, film literate and or you've seen Otomo's movie. You think that. And then we read the interview and he's like, oh, yeah, Cyber City, Uedo 808, and Akira, yeah, definitely those were hugely influential. And you go, wow, how about that?
One of the other things I think I really like about Yo Moriyama and his, when I say he makes things cinematic, I don't think a lot of people really recognize what that is. And a big part of that is show, don't tell. There's a scene, spoiler, where Joe is expected to throw the fight at Megalonia. And what's his nuts, the really creepy Yakuza guy is there. And Nanbu is sweating because he's like, you know what? No, I don't know if I can. I don't want to lose my eye. And then all of a sudden, Nambu's just like, screw it, Joe, fight, blah blah blah, and he goes for it. And right as soon as he does that, the everybody, the henchmen go, blah blah blah, and then it pans or it shows the Yakuza guy, and he's eating this fish. And right as Nanbu betrays his orders, he doesn't say anything. Nothing is said. No dialogue is said. And the guy goes to put his fork in the fish, and he pops the eye out. I'm going to be kind of controversial here, but there's a lot of anime fans today who need to be spoon-fed every little thing, and they would completely miss that nuance. They would completely miss the nuance of, you don't need to be told he's going to lose his eye. Oh, symbolism, he popped the eye out. It's the little details like that that make Megalo Box so good, because Megalo Box was literally the extreme of show, don't tell. It was a cinematic anime masterpiece. Now, I'll go on to another thing that I really appreciated. One, all the episode titles are badass. Born to Die. I want to look at some of the other ones because we were going through them and they're all in English, and I'm just like, oh my god, this is amazing. Okay, let's look at some of these. Gear is Dead. The Man Only Dies Once. Let's Dance with Death Until the Last Dog Dies. Like, oh my god. Hype. The music. The everything. Hype, hype, hype. This anime abused cliffhangers. You'd get to the end of an episode, you're like, you're tearing your hair out because that's how well it was done. And, I know we said this when we were going through it, but I can't remember the last time that I had an anime like elicit emotion from me. Like, just like I was completely, utterly, absolutely engaged in the anime, and I wanted to know everything. But I wanted to be along for that ride. And I understand, like, one of the things about Megalobox is that it plays with your expectations a lot. So when the ending happened, I think, again, a lot of newer anime fans were like, oh, well, it's rushed and it's not. What everybody wanted was they wanted Yuri and Joe to punch each other, but Yuri to go down first and then raise Joe's hand and the Megalobox theme pop up, which, by the way, the Megalobox soundtrack, go download it. It's the most hype thing. You can work out to that. It's amazing. But honestly, I would not. That's the only thing I would have changed about the ending. Everything else was fine. And I think just because people missed that, they didn't get that, like, deliberate moment of Joe's hand being raised and he did it. He won Megalonia. in this really uh, upfront way. I feel like people made it out to be rushed. I don't think the way they did it was necessarily bad, and I don't think it was rushed. I think he did it that way deliberately. And was it a little bit odd considering like all of the hype, especially the hype going into episode 13 from episode 12. Oh my god, the beginning of episode 13 was just like I felt the like goosebumps jumping off of my body. The adrenaline was ridiculous, but I don't think the ending was bad. I just think that the ending was much like Joe. It was unexpected. He came, nobody knew who he was, and he left. Nobody knew who he was, you know? I mean, obviously they knew who he was, but I understand where people are coming from, but I like the way that they did the ending because it wasn't a cliche. They still played with your expectations all the way to the end. And quite honestly, that last shot where they have his record and it goes 7 and whatever undefeated, you know, Megalonia champion, it's like that's all you need to see.
Yeah, and I want to, chime in there that like, though I might concede, well, perhaps it was a bit rushed, which is also subjective. I certainly don't think the ending was bad. And you saw Yuri in a wheelchair. What? Did not see that coming. And you get to see Joe made his point, and you get the feeling, which is all about his character. Like he didn't want to be Yuri. He wanted to beat Yuri. And he did. And he proved to the world, and most importantly to himself, that he could. That he was championship material. That, well, you don't have your proper ID card, so I get. Well, screw that. I don't need it. I'll let my fist do the talking. And that's, I remember watching a boxing documentary one time, and that's, you know, as we see here, Japanese production done beautifully. But that's probably something that's why it resonates with us and a lot of American viewers is because that's Americana. That's so American boxing. And as I recall somebody saying this, I wish I could remember to quote them properly. Um, Rich kids don't go into boxing. Boxing was one of those things. That's why it's the most American feel good ideal of a sport that we probably have is because it's almost always it's people like Joe. It's people at the bottom. It's people who are poor. It's people who have no other recourse to get ahead in life than to get punched in the face over and over and over and over again and to claw their way literally to the top. Going on further about, like you said, and granted, I'll admit I've not kept up to date with as much anime as I used to anymore, just a time thing. So I've seen in the last 5 plus years, I've seen some good anime, good social commentary, like One Punch Man, which is also fun. I've seen drama, horror, and it's made me feel emotions like Attack on Titan, and all well done. But I can't remember the last time, and I'm sure someone else out there has said it probably, but no, that was that just came from the heart when I said somebody's making anime cinematic again. I can't remember the last time I've seen an anime, TV show, not like a, Miyazaki movie or, Ghibli production or something, that, really felt cinematic. And perhaps someone will make the case one day he needs to have more of a catalog of films, which, or in this case, anime, whatever he does, which I'm sure he eventually will throughout his career, to have a an actual auteur uh, analysis performed. I think of somebody like Tomohiko Ito, who is competent, who's very good at what he does. He's directed a lot of anime people are probably familiar with. A lot of what he does, though, is because it's his job. I've heard the term, people call it a mature en scene, a scene set, or what have you, is they're not, uh, you know, they're translating someone else's vision, basically. And, versus here, like a You Moriyama, like a Shinichiro Watanabe, where they have more carte blanche and they can creatively, put their thumbprint on it, their seal, their signature on it. And, it really shines through in this. And again, that interview with Moriyama where he says, he watched a lot of boxing movies, a lot of actual fights, and you can see that in the camera angles for one. That's just a result of that, I think. And again, on that cinematic note, and again on the note of subtlety. I remember us saying this when Nanbu was seeing the Yakuza guy, and he's like threatening to turn him into soup. And the guy's just coolly back there, and Nanbu's saying, "Oh well, gee," trying to explain himself, and he's got his sleeves rolled up, and you see the tattoos, and he just scoops the ladle, pours a thing of soup, and hands it over to Nanbu, and Nanbu's like, he just has this look of dread as he's looking at it before he then like closes his one good eye he has at that point and takes a swig of it. And I think you said it, and we both had the same reaction, but you were like, "Oh, he just ate a guy there. Like
Oh
you
yeah,
know he
no,
just ate a guy." You're like,
absolutely.
"Oh my god, you didn't have to be told that." And that's another thing, even though what a balance this had of homage to the original Tomorrow's Joe, adapted into an anime, but also, at heart, it's a sports manga, which those have a lot of inner monologue. And as we've talked about before, I think, it's different mediums, manga versus on the screen. Uh, it shouldn't be as verbose when you translate to the screen, but I digress. So you have moments of inner monologue and stuff like that, but only when it's needed. And so another one we talk about, Aragaki, when Joe goes and meets him, and you can tell they're kind of having, this is the, of course, I don't want to say cliche, but perhaps it is, but before the fight, they're gonna have a little sparring and match with with their words, and kind of checking each other out. And in the background, got these kids are playing basketball, whatever, setting the scene. And I can't remember what Joe said. I think it was something Joe said. I think Joe had it. But so Joe makes this rhetorical jab, and it lands. And as he says that, and Aragaki doesn't show it, but it's like, he's right. He made a point on you. Swish. Basketball goes through the net. And it's like, it's 2 points, bro. It's full of moments like that. That if you're not paying attention, you might just overlook. So that's a great reason to watch it, folks. It's a great reason to rewatch it. I bet there's stuff that that I missed that now I'm excited to get in the ring with Megalo Box all over again.
Yeah, especially now that it's funny. This is something else we were talking about. We're like, how did this not get simuldub? And a week or two after it finished airing in Japan, it gets picked up by Viz. So I'm like, ooh, Viz is picking it up. So we'll have another reason to go back through Megalobox.
That's right. That's right. I'd love to watch this dubbed. And Viz, I'm like, hey, all right, I'm excited. Let's see what you guys got. And you know, I'm excited. I think they'll do a good job. So there you go. As though it needed an excuse to watch this again. Well, mi amigo, is there anything else you wanted to gush about while we were here today? I know this was very impromptu for you and for me, even more so than usual for this for this cast. But we had a lot of fun. Was there anything else you wanted to say to the listeners out there before we check out today?
Well, the only other thing I wanted to add was there were no teenagers in the entire anime, and the anime was better for it. There were only adults and only kids. There was none of that, like, make anime cinematic again. Get rid of teenagers in anime. Like, I'm tired of that. Let's adults exist. Okay, anime, like, they are real. They're heavy set, they're tall, they're skinny, they're broken, they have noses. Let's bring adults back to anime, because when they're there, you don't have any of that, like you see a teenager in anime, and like some of my favorite almost all my favorite anime of all time revolve around teenagers, but they are without a doubt the number one, like 99% of anime now. I'm fucking tired of it. Like, I want to see there are different groups of people. Just like looking at Sachio and his gang of kids, like, they were 12 years old. They were like 8 or 7. they had a different attitude because they were just kids. They weren't super angsty. They weren't, oh, this is my best friend in school. Also, there were no schools. Fuck schools. I'm tired of schools in anime. Let's not, okay? Like let's get away from that. There's more to the world of there's more to the cinematic universe of anime than high schools and teenagers. Let's get away from it. Megalobox proved that if you eliminate teenagers, not only will your anime survive, it'll thrive. So that's the only other thing I wanted to add.
But don't we want to see angsty teen Joe in the after school boxing club? And oh, what if Yukiko doesn't like me?
You know, it was really great not having inner monologues about, oh, I'm not good enough. It's like, you know what? There were moments where Joe believed that, but he didn't have to fucking say it. He just did it. He was just like, oh, man, I'm having a hard time sleeping. I don't know if I can get up tomorrow. But he did because he's like 23 or 5 or whatever. And he realizes that not getting up is not an option. Like that's people don't realize how much different that is when the main characters are not like 12. And like I said, Evangelion is one of my favorite anime. Tenchi Muyo is one of my favorite anime. Some of my favorite anime have been absolutely 100% teenagers. But, you look at Megalobox, you look at an anime like Black Heaven. The problems of adults and the way adults approach those problems are completely different. And I'm not just saying that as an adult myself. I'm just saying, like, even when I was a kid, all of my favorite shows revolved around adults. I'm tired. I don't care. I don't give a fuck about school. I don't care about their stupid relationship problems. They want to have a relationship, it can happen, but that doesn't always need to be there. These tropes do not always need to be in there. They don't need to be thrust into the plot. Megalobox proved that you don't need any of that. It's just baggage.
Old men yelling at cloud moment, folks. But
Back in my day,
it's just, I mean, you'd get tired of the same thing every day, wouldn't you? You know what I mean? Like if you had the same thing for lunch every day, it's just we've been inundated with it. So it was nice. I gotta reiterate, it was nice. It's not set in school. It's not about some teenager and oh, so and so. What if they don't like me or notice me or oh, social angst, which it's all fine. And depending on where you're at in life, that's great. I really enjoyed Watamote. That's fine, but we can do other stuff too. And I hope for the industry at large, as was Bebop and so many other examples. Uh, I heard Digibro saying this one time, like, oh, anime should be more artistic like Bebop and not as commercial. Like, I mean, take your pick. It's a baker's dozen any given season of, generic whatever. In a perfect world, yeah, but, you know, at the end of the day, Bebop was produced to sell toys. So that commercial side and the wonderful capitalist system that we have, like that's always going to be there, and so it's a necessity. So Bebop, artistically successful, yes, was also commercially successful. Same with Evangelion. Same with most other stuff. If they wanted to keep their head above water. So, but that's what we're showing here with Moriyama, and I'll reiterate what you said, Mike. It's like it can be done. We can do stuff that's not set in school. We can do stuff that's not set with teenagers in the after-school club, and the blah, 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 blah. We can do once in a while other stuff, and it's all good. And it's nice to have variety, something, spice of life. So I think that'll be it. I don't know how many rounds we may have gone here, but it definitely felt like a team effort. So I want to thank you again, buddy, for hopping in here today. It's always a pleasure.
always a pleasure of mine.
Thank you, listeners, for once again listening. And I apologize that my podcast installments are so infrequent. Oh, so busy nowadays. But we're gonna keep going as long as we can. We're gonna rotate the cast, some familiar voices, maybe some new ones, maybe some special guests, and you never know what title we're going to cover. So if you want to hear more, subscribe to us on YouTube. We're on iTunes. I got a Twitter. I got a Facebook. Wherever you want to go to keep up to date with us, and we'll keep you up to date. whenever whenever those podcast installments. Speaking of things, however infrequently, it's nice when they do come out. And so hopefully we get more Who Cares. Hopefully we get more from Moriyama. Hopefully we get more of making anime cinematic again. I like that. We're gonna make that a thing.
We'll
So
make that a shirt.
yeah, that'd be a great T-shirt there. There you go. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you next time.